The origin of present-day inequality. When looking at the world of today and looking at the differences that exist between human beings on Earth, one could ask if there is a particular reason as to why a specific race or country or continent ended up holding a more favorable position of power in comparison to other races, countries or continents, where, through economic principles of debt, entire nations have ended up being enslaved to Western creditors with no way out, where entire populations are left to starve without regard from the Western countries, where one half of the world is actually working to feed the other half that live in better conditions and enjoy more wealth, health and better education. Was there a pre-programmed advantage involved? And if so, did it have anything to do with the human? Since the times when modern civilization came into contact with the forgotten parts of the world, the West was faced with a peculiar question. How come populations, such as the Aboriginals in Australia, had virtually made no progress since the Stone Age? People of modern civilization saw themselves as superior in knowledge, science and culture, giving them a divine right to either exterminate, convert or enslave the indigenous populations. Ultimately, the reason as to why one part of the world came to hold the more fortunate position is then attributed to the particular evolution of knowledge, science and technology within that society. This is how history is being taught in schools and how it is recorded in the history books. History books will typically emphasize the superiority of the West in terms of philosophy, religion, science and technology, and they will meticulously trace the evolutions thereof. Within that, the core belief of the Western world is reinforced that knowledge is the actual drive of evolution, change and progress. Recent historical research has uncovered that this is not so. In fact, the role of knowledge, science, technology, religion and even culture in itself are quite irrelevant factors in the journey of humanity that has resulted in the extreme inequalities that we witness today. So, then what are the relevant factors? The biggest factors that have in fact determined the inequality between and within human societies of today are plants, animals and germs. To place this into perspective, we will consider the starting point of when, according to the historical record, human civilization started. This is said to be between 13,000 and 10,000 years ago, which is after the beginning of a new climate cycle on Earth, where it basically became warmer on Earth from that point onwards. With human civilization, I refer to a new type of living together. Thus, I'm not talking about the beginning of humans living together as such, which existed much earlier. If we look at the basics of human life on Earth, we can ask, what do humans primarily require to be able to exist? According to the standard archaeological research, human beings had typically been living as nomadic hunter-gatherers, where they would settle and move according to a temporary, favorable environment. Studies of hunter-gatherers in recent centuries have shown that such people lived in what is termed an egalitarian form of social organization. Egalitarian implies nothing more than that every member of the group is equally responsible for obtaining food, because otherwise there will simply not be enough for everyone. Hence, there will be no social classes of any significance in such a small society. Even the one regarded as generally or more or most responsible looks and lives exactly the same way as everyone else, simply because they cannot afford to look or be more than others. Such societies are typically very limited in their cultural products because they moved a lot and their only means of transport was their back. To put it extremely simplistically, there existed two basic types of human societies: nomadic hunter-gatherers and sedentary farmers. It is quite relevant to make that distinction because all the current societies that are regarded as more advanced originated from sedentary farmer societies. So the step from the hunter-gatherer type of society to sedentary farmers appears to be the decisive step in the course of human history. The history of farming is said to have started 10,000 years ago, thus marking the beginning of human civilization. Let's look at this point then. What changes had occurred as a result of humans becoming sedentary farmers? What generally happens is the following. At one point, the band or tribe will find a vegetable that it can cultivate in a controlled area of soil, which will cause the available food resources to increase. Everywhere where the circumstances have allowed for it, man has discovered that he could manipulate certain plants to become suitable for cultivation. A direct consequence of a heightened food production is that the population will be able to grow and a situation will emerge in which some are discharged of their food-producing duties. A new class is able to emerge. In all societies where farming occurred, hierarchy and social stratification have resulted from it. It seems to be part of the human program. Simplistically, inventions such as writing, the wheel, and metallurgy could only arise in societies where such a thing as free time existed, allowing for some humans to explore reality, to play around, as part of a new specialized activity pertaining to a specialized class. Thus, farming allowed for heightened food production, which led to population increases, which in turn led to a class emerging that is able to completely be free from food-related duties. Thus, agriculture laid the foundation for modern society, in which many are able to never in their lives have to be concerned with food production. In terms of practical living, farmer societies would develop a higher level of effectiveness than hunter-gatherers. So then why didn't everyone on Earth become farmers? For farming to really be worth the trouble, one needed two things: an effective vegetable and a big mammal to assist with muscle power. There exist around about 200,000 wild plant species on Earth, including non-edible ones such as trees. Of those 200,000 wild plant species, only a few hundreds had been successfully domesticated, and of those hundreds, only a few dozen are used in today's world for worldwide production. What does that imply? It means that human societies did not necessarily have access to effective vegetables for domestication and food production. Within that, bear in mind that none of the vegetables we eat today existed as such in nature. They were genetically modified through a long process of domestication, thousands of years ago. That no significant new plants have ever been domesticated in modern times suggests that humans did explore all available possibilities already in ancient times. That gives us a pretty sober picture as to the apparent abundance of the Earth's natural resources. The big mammals that were used could be seen as the first machine, with the sole difference that this machine wasn't invented and built by the human, but simply existed and walked around in humans' natural environment. All humans had to do was to capture the thing. Though, such mammals weren't readily available anywhere. In fact, very few mammals have ever been available that allowed for effective domestication. To establish a clear definition, domestication is an animal bred in captivity, with controlled feeding and breeding, as opposed to taming, which is capturing an animal born in the wild. Having a big domesticated mammal constituted quite a big advantage, because, in addition of it offering superior muscle power, it also was a source of fertilizer, a means of transport, a source of meat, and some could also produce milk. Mammals were especially utilized to pull plows, which allowed for an exponential increase in the surface that could be sown, instead of having to put the grains in the soil manually. Now, amongst the 148 big herbivorous mammals, only 14 ever proved to be effective for domestication. To begin with, one must be able to feed the animal. Consider that the biggest percentage of all the grains in the world today are being used as food for cattle. The animal must have a fast enough growth rate. It must be willing to mate in captivity, which many mammals don't ever. The animal must have a genetic disposition. For instance, while horses had been successfully domesticated in Eurasia, African zebras were, and are still today, impossible to domesticate. The animal simply does not submit to the human. And this goes for all the big mammals of the African continent, such as the rhinos, hippos, buffaloes, eland, etc. Much research, money and effort has been directed towards increasing the amount of domesticated species in modern times. It has virtually amounted to nothing. This suggests pre-programmed conditions in nature, leading to outflows of inequality. From that perspective, different people on different continents simply did not have an equal starting point. Certain environments allowed for more possibilities than others, either offering the human many opportunities or either limiting him to an extreme degree.